The arena was deathly quiet, except for the sound of the mechanical doll swiveling its head towards the crowd. "Red light!" it bellowed out, freezing everyone in place. And you were no stranger to the deadly tension that followed. The games had been relentless, wearing down everyone to their resolve and stealing away any sliver of normalcy. The only thing that kept you alive was your hatred for Thanos, and strangely enough, your inexplicable attraction to the tyrant. Thanos stood across the field, his massive frame a shadow loomed over the commotion. His face was unreadable as always, his movements were calculated. He wasn't playing to survive, he was playing to dominate, as if you despised him that much, which you did. You couldn't help but notice the commanding way he carried himself. The pull between the two of you had grown, a maddening magnetic force that calculated, and one night, we both crossed that line that could never really be uncrossed. The memory of his touch haunted you, and now you moved forward on green light. It was reckless, dangerous, and yet so intoxicating that you felt the ghost of his hand on your skin. You shook the thought away, focusing on surviving, at least this round. Thanos didn't so much as glance in your direction, which was both a relief and an annoyance. You hated how much you wanted his attention, despite yourself. The game ended without incident, and you retreated to the dormitory with the other survivors. Your body felt heavy, an exhaustion deeper than usual, settling into your bones. Lately, you've been feeling strange, nauseous, lightheaded, uncharacteristically sluggish. I mean, you just chalked it up to the stress and, the lack of proper food. But something in the back of your mind whispered that it was more than that. "Still alive, I see." Thanos' deep voice rumbled behind you, startling you out of all your thoughts. You turned sharply to see him leaning against a wall, arms crossed and his dark eyes fixated on you, with that disgustingly smug expression. "What do you want?" you snapped, keeping your voice low. The last thing you needed was for anyone to overhear this conversation. He smirked. "You look like you're about to collapse out there. Thought I'd offer my assistance." "I don't need your help," you bit out, brushing past him. His hand shot out, catching your wrist in a grip that was firm but not painful. "You're not as strong as you think," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're pushing yourself too hard." You yanked your arm free, glaring up at him. "And since when do you care about my well-being? You've made it perfectly clear we're not allies." Thanos' smirk faltered for a moment. Something unspoken flickered in his eyes. And before he could even respond, the guards entered the room, signaling the end of this conversation. You walked away without looking back, your heart pounding in your chest. Later that night in the dormitory, it was cloaked in darkness. You found yourself unable to sleep, restless, gnawed at you, and the strange sensations in your body only added to your discomfort. You decided to sneak out for some fresh air, careful not to wake anyone as you slipped out of the room. You weren't surprised to find Thanos already outside, leaning against the railing with his arms crossed. His presence was both infuriating and oddly comforting, though you'd never admit it. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked without even looking at you. You crossed your arms, keeping a safe distance. "What's it to you?" He turned to face you fully, his gaze piercing. "You're not as subtle as you think. Something's wrong with you. You're slower, weaker, and it's only a matter of time before someone notices and takes advantage of it." You bristled at his words, though you couldn't really deny the truth of them. "I'll manage," you said stubbornly. "I always do." Thanos took a step closer, his towering presence making you feel small in comparison. "You're too proud for your own good," he muttered. "And you're too arrogant," he shot back, though the venom laced in your voice lacked. The tension between you was like electricity. It crackled. The air was thick with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Before you could overthink it, Thanos had closed the distance between you, his hands cupping the side of your face as he pulled you in for a heated kiss. You melted against it, despite yourself. Your hands clutched at his shirt as the words faded away for a moment. There was no Squid Games, no life or death stakes, only the two of you and the fire that burned beneath you. And when you finally pulled away, breathless and dazed, you stared up at him with a mix of anger and longing. "This means nothing," you said, more to convince yourself than anyone. He smirked, his thumb brushing against your cheek. Keep telling yourself that. The next day, you forced yourself to focus on the games, even though your body felt heavier than ever. Every step was a struggle, every breath was a reminder that something wasn't right, that Thanos' words from the night before echoed in your mind. His concern was disguised as criticism, and as much as you hated to admit it, he might have been right. You weren't at your best, and it was only a matter of time before someone noticed. The next game was grueling, pushing you to your limits, and by the end of it, you could barely stand, your vision was swimming, and you stumbled back into your dormitory. Thanos was waiting for you. His expression was unreadable as he caught you, before you could even collapse. "You're done pretending," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Whatever's wrong with you, we're going to figure it out." You wanted to complain, to argue, to push him back, but the exhaustion was too much. For once, you let him help you, leaning on him as he guided you to a quieter part of the dormitory. His touch was surprisingly gentle. His concern was genuine despite the rough exterior, always trying to maintain it. As you drifted off, one thought lingered in your mind. Whatever the hell was happening to you, it was only the beginning. And Thanos, for better or for worse, was now part of it. The dormitory was suffocating. The air reeked of sweat and blood and tears and desperation. But that wasn't what had doubled you into the corner, dry heaving into your hands. Your body had been repelling against you for weeks. There was no way to deny it anymore. Something was wrong. The last came in nearly being your end. You'd barely been able to keep up, stumbling at every turn, your legs trembling under your own weight. It wasn't the exhaustion or the hunger, it was something deeper, something you couldn't even explain. Thanos' gaze was heavy on you as you clutched your stomach, trying to steady your breathing. He was across the room. His presence felt closer, like a storm, hovering just over the horizon. You could sense his frustration, his anger even, at your refusal to admit you weren't okay. And yet, when you felt his shadow fall over you a moment later, you weren't surprised. "You're hiding something," he said, his voice deep and low, low enough for no one else to hear. "I'm fine," you snapped through your teeth, but the lie was flimsy at best. Thanos crouched down in front of you, his massive frame blocking out the dim light that steadied you. Calculating eyes watching you. "Fine people don't look like they're about to kneel over and die," he said flatly. You glared at him, too stubborn to respond, but your body betrayed you. Another wave of dizziness hit. Thanos' hand shot out, steadying you before you could collapse. His touch was firm but careful, a stark contrast to the brutal persona he showed during the games. "You're going to tell me what's going on," he said, his voice tinged with something you couldn't quite place. Concern? No, that couldn't be it. You shook your head, pulling away from him. I don't know, okay? I don't know what's going on. You stopped, swallowing hard at the nausea that rised in your throat. Thanos' eyes narrowed. "When did this start?" You hesitated, trying to piece together the timeline. A few weeks ago, I started feeling sick and weird and tired all the time and sick in the morning. I thought I was just stressed out, but his expression darkened for a moment as you thought he might actually be worried. "And you've been pushing yourself through the games like this?" You scoffed. "What choice do I have?" You shot back. "It's not like I can exactly take a day off." Thanos didn't respond, his jaw tightening, and he rose to his full height. "Come on," he ordered, leaving no room for argument. Why? You asked, her voice wiry. Because you're not going to figure this out on your own, he said, grabbing your arm gently, but firmly. And because I'm not going to let you die before I can get the satisfaction of beating you in these games. You rolled your eyes at his attempt to mask the concern and bravo, but you let him lead you into the dormitory. Thanos found an empty storage room with dim lighting casting shadows across the walls. He closed the door behind you, his broad frame blocking it like a sentry. Sit. Now, he ordered, nodding towards a crate. You nodded, crossing your arms. I'm not a dog. He raised an eyebrow. Fine. Stand. See if I care if you pass out. Grudgingly, you sat. Thanos leaned against the door, studying you. When was the last time you know? He gestured vaguely, looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable. You frowned. What the hell are you talking about? He sighed, his usual patience wearing thin. You're like woman cycle thing. He clarified, his tone was gruff. Your face heated in retaliation, and realization hit you like a truck. That's irrelevant. You stammered, looking away. It's not, he said firmly. I mean, think about it. The fatigue, the nausea, the dizziness. Have you even considered— Don't say it. You interrupted, your voice sharp. And though you had already taken root in your mind, the missed cycle of the symptoms, the night you and Thanos had crossed the line. Oh my god, you whispered, your hand instinctively going to your belly. No, that's not possible. Thanos pushed out the door, stepping in closer. You don't sound convinced. You shook your head, panic rising in your chest. This can't be happening. Not here, not now. He crouched in front of you, his expression uncharacteristically serious. If it's true, you need to stop pushing yourself. You won't survive in games like this. What am I supposed to do, Thanos? You hissed, your voice cracking. Ask the guards for a break because I might be pregnant? They'll kill me. His jaw clenched, his hand reaching out for your knee. The gesture was surprisingly gentle, grounding you in a way you didn't expect. We'll figure it out, he said quietly. We? You echoed, narrowing your eyes. Since when do you care about my survival? His lips twitched into a smirk, but it didn't reach his eyes. I told you. Your mind's defeat, not theirs. Besides, he hesitated, something unspoken passing between you. If it's mine, I have a responsibility to it. You stared at him, stunned in the silence, for all his arrogance and ruthlessness. You hadn't expected him to say that. Look, he continued, his tone softening just slightly. I'm not saying I'm gonna play house with you, but I'm not gonna let you die either. You wanted to argue, to tell him that you didn't need his help, but the truth was you were terrified. And as much as you hated to admit, having Thanos on your side might just be your only chance. Fine, you said, your voice barely above a whisper. But we can't let anyone else find out, or just at least until we know for sure. He nodded, rising to his full height. Agreed. But you're gonna take it easy from now on. No more trying to prove how tough you are. You rolled your eyes, but a small part of you was grateful for his insistence. And ever. As he opened the door, you couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. Whatever happened, you weren't alone. For better or for worse, Thanos was with you. And for now, maybe that was enough. To be continued.